A lot of players are talented beyond their rank, but fail to achieve their maximum potential because they don't have a good strategy for climbing the ladder. Hello everyone, my name is Achax, and in this video, we are going to talk about how to increase your rank by making good choices with the skills you already have. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be the first to see more content designed to help you rank up just like this. Quick disclaimer, keep in mind that the ranking system is largely kept under wraps by Riot. My ideas of how the system works come from my experience over the many games of Valorant I have played and what Riot themselves have told us. There is no guarantee that the information presented in this video is factual. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. We're going to start by talking about ELO to make sure everyone is on the same page, but if you're already familiar with how these systems work and what Riot values the most, feel free to skip to the time currently being displayed on the screen. Alright, so ELO is a system of providing a relative skill rating between players. For our purposes, it's just a number that we want to increase so that we can increase our rank. How do we know what that number is? Well, we don't. At least Riot doesn't tell us. But they do give us some information about how our number is changing. In the post-game screens, you can see a certain number of red or green arrows. These roughly represent how much your number has increased or decreased. 3 arrows signals a more severe change than 1 arrow, while an upward green arrow means an increase and a downward red one means the opposite. Another important piece of information is that rounds matter the most in Riot's ranking system. You can read the information Riot provides yourself by clicking on your rank in the career tab of the game. Alright, so whether we know the inner workings of the ELO system or not, it's not a far-fetched assumption to say that winning increases the number and losing decreases the number. It's also clear that winning by more increases the number more, as opposed to winning by less, while the number decreases the greater the loss. I know this all feels fairly obvious, but it's important we are all in the same spot. Economizing your ELO simply means making decisions so that you win as often as possible by as much as you can, while losing as infrequently as possible and by as little as you can. So how do we do that? Let's start by talking about surrendering. Every time someone surrenders to my team, I see a massive rating increase. I don't know of any evidence to suggest that you get some kind of rating decrease break as a result of surrendering. I think the only quote-unquote benefit is that you don't have to play more rounds that you think you are going to lose. In other words, you surrender out of frustration and your ELO takes a huge hit. This doesn't make sense from an economic ELO perspective for a few reasons. Remember that part of the ELO strategy is losing as infrequently as possible, and that another part is softening that loss as much as possible. Surrendering robs you of the ability to do either one. In my experience with the post-game rating feedback, there is a pretty big difference between losing 13-4 versus 13-6. Every single round counts. Further, comebacks are very possible. Especially with my style where it sometimes takes me a while to figure out the other team, I sometimes develop ridiculous deficits before we make a comeback. Let's look at the issue for what it is, an emotional one. People who surrender tend to be doing so out of frustration or anger or something along those lines. It's okay if that's you too. It's okay to feel like this, but one of the things you'll hopefully learn is that the struggle is part of solving the problem. It's in this period that you really grow mentally as a player. A player who always says they're just better and doesn't try to do anything about it is the one who becomes stagnant and doesn't rank up, while the players who are willing to struggle through it are the ones with the potential to actually figure it out and become much, much better. Everyone needs a reminder of this at least occasionally, so don't beat yourself up over it if you've been making this mistake so far. Remember, it doesn't matter what order you win the rounds in as long as you win 2 more than the opponent, and if you have to lose by as little as possible. The second issue is quality versus quantity. One of the biggest changes I made to go from gold to plat was playing less games in favor of playing higher quality games. This is because winning 7 games in 1 week is better than winning 12 and losing 11 in the same time period. This extra time meant warming up for a few more minutes. It also meant focusing more for the 1 or 2 games. I think people really expect too highly of themselves when it comes to focus. Focusing intently for a long time is actually really hard. If you play a bunch of games right in a row and your focus is constantly decreasing over that time, you're not going to be playing your best, and you probably won't win as many games. Mechanics and game sense aren't going to help you too much if you're constantly spacing out. Once again, this is mostly an emotional problem, which, spoiler alert, is going to be a reoccurring theme. Most people are re-queuing after a win because they feel good, and they want another win. Many people are re-queuing after a defeat because they feel like they lost something and they want it back. Neither of these are bad sentiments in my opinion, but you just have to expand the timeline. You can get that win tomorrow, another on Thursday, and then rank up this weekend. You can make up that defeat in one game 2 days from now when you feel like you're on fire. I often hear about players who drop as many as 9 tiers in a week because they just don't know when to stop. Contrary to some popular rhetoric, knowing when to give up actually is a skill, and it's one that can help you out a lot here. If you do want to play another game, take a 5-minute break to stretch out and whatnot so that you can come back refreshed. Give your mind a break so it doesn't have to focus continually for ridiculous periods of time. The third point we're going over is the skill of losing by less. When I solo queue and we're losing, I constantly see players who don't try anything new. If something isn't working, it's probably best to try something else. Try a bunch of different things. If you can get a random 3 rounds, losing 5 to 13 is going to be much better than losing 2 to 13 because you refuse to leave your comfort zone. Adaptability is a huge skill, which I talk about in depth in my video on how to be consistent. This is once again mostly a mental roadblock. The willingness to try new things, even outside your comfort zone, is a huge asset that anyone at any rank can benefit from in Valorant. As funny as it sounds, it can be kind of scary to deviate from what you are used to, but it is often the way to get the best outcome for your rank and stands to make you a much, much better player. Another common roadblock that people run into is trying to force fights out of pride. This is a weakness I run into all the time. An opponent will peek me at the start of the round and I'll win. Immediately after, they take the same fight and I win again, over and over. This doesn't mean I'm better than them. If they change the distance, or the weapons, or the situation, or half a dozen other things, I might not win. But they'll never know because their pride forbids them from quote-unquote admitting defeat. There is that common joke about running away versus tactically retreating, but there is an actual difference. One is motivated by fear and the other is motivated by intelligence. Don't let your emotions control you here. Make the smart play. Let's change gears into everyone's favorite subject, winning by more. A bunch of my rank ups have been after a 2 to 3 string of 3-arrow wins. I personally consider 3-arrow wins to be the key to ranking up, but maybe you have a different opinion and that's totally fine. The bottom line is that a lot of people aren't winning by as much as they could be, and as a result aren't gaining as much elo as their skill level ought to. There is a common expression that is applied to StarCraft 2 about smelling blood, which basically means that a player sees that their opponent is reeling and they want to deal a finishing blow before their opponent can recover. The key phrase there is before their opponent can recover. All the time in my solo queue games, I see players who get too comfortable with a nice lead and stop trying. Remember, winning by 13 to 3 is much better than winning by 13 to 5. An even worse outcome would be allowing your opponent to recover, make a comeback, and win. That's much worse for your elo, and it's pretty frustrating. I usually see one of two arguments for throwing with a lead. One, we can afford to lose those rounds because we are ahead. That may be true, but you get less elo the more rounds you lose. The second argument is more common and ends in frustration for so many players. It is that the other team is so incredibly bad that we can win rounds without even trying. This mentality is based on one crucial assumption that you don't have full control over, that you can beat the other team whenever you want if you start trying again. Let's break this down. You are probably much better than the other team because you have been trying to a certain degree. If you start trying less, you will very likely decrease the level of skill you are expressing in the game. Once you've done that, there is no guarantee that the opponents are still worse than you. It's much more difficult in my experience to revive effort in team synchrony than it is to just maintain it. Valorant is a very momentum-driven game. It's not like you should be scared of losing it, but don't hand the momentum off to the other team on purpose. When you give the opponent space, you allow them to recover and start coming back. Further, when they recover, they may come back stronger than before. I know that I've won a bunch of comebacks just because the other team gave me the extra round I needed to figure out what their weakness was so that we could start pummeling them. Maybe the other team figures out team chemistry or strategy or mentality, or they get fully warmed up in the time you gave them to recover. The cherry on top is that once you give them space, it's easier for them to create more space and more space, because now you need to recover and they have momentum. A lot of players become especially distracted as their emotions change from cocky to a bit doubtful to disbelief to anger as the opponents make a comeback. There's just a huge can of worms you risk opening by decreasing your effort or throwing a few rounds because you are in the lead. When you see that your opponent is reeling, that's your signal to accelerate and finish them. Don't miss the opportunity to get so much closer to that next rank out of overconfidence. If economizing your elo is your biggest weakness, there is good news. You already do the hard part every game. Economizing your elo is that last step to make sure you finish strong and get the returns that you've already earned. I hope this video helped you. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.